When you think of Resident Evil, one of the characters that's bound to come to mind is Jill Valentine. Introduced in 1996 as one of the OG protagonists, Jill cemented her legacy as one of the most beloved characters in Resident Evil. From surviving the Spencer Mansion to battling BOWs all over the globe, Jill's story is one of resilience, strength, and unwavering determination. Welcome to Bird's Tales, that show we take any character from horror media, break down their lives, and analyze their character. Today's subject is the lovely Jill Valentine. We know almost nothing about Jill's childhood. The only thing we know is that her father is French and her mother is of Japanese descent. In the 1990s, Jill joined the US Army. There she was noticed by Delta Force recruitments. It should be known that Delta Force does not enlist women, but they loved Jill so much that they allowed her to join their 6-month training course. Imagine Jill, the only female in an entire course, outshining everyone else and everything. Well, there wasn't proof that she was doing exactly that, but I imagine she was. But she did excel in bomb disposal, lockpicking, and she was known for her dexterity, her ability to stay focused on a goddamn mission, and of course for just being the best person in the entire course. Jill's participation in this training course will make her one of the only women in history with Delta Force training. After the training course, Jill wasn't able to join Delta Force for obvious reasons, and she would continue her service in the US Army. There she would meet Forrest Dead Guy. I don't want to say his last name because it's not that important. Forrest Dead Guy will become a member of STAR's Bravo team. He wasn't cool enough to be a part of Alpha team. After her service, Jill moved to Raccoon, and in 1996 she was scouted by Albert Wesker and she joined Raccoon's Special Tactic and Rescue Service, starting where everyone else started, in the Bravo team. Jill wasn't the kind of person to brag, so she never told anyone in STARS about her Delta Force training. Well, now that I think about it, Jill never talked much about herself at all. Despite keeping so much a secret, Jill would still befriend so many people in the STARS unit like Dead 1, Dead 2, Dead 3, Chris and Barry. But with Chris, she would become especially close, not like that though. She would even ask him to train her in marksmanship, the only thing she wasn't good at. By 1998, Jill joined Albert Wesker's Alpha team, making her the only female a part of the group. Jill should be really used to this by now. Jill was the team's B&E specialist, or breaking and entering specialist, and during this time she gained the title as Master of Unlocking. In spring 1998, Raccoon was hunted by the deaths of hikers and suburban families in the Arclay Mountain area. Some of the victims looked like they were attacked by demon dogs, while others were victims of cannibalism. On the 23rd of July, Bravo team was sent to investigate the Arclay Mountains. Soon after they set off, Alpha team lost all contact with them. So the next day, Alpha team went to look for Bravo team. In the original game, Alpha team go look for Bravo team. The same day, they lose contact with Bravo team. Soon after arriving to the Arclay Mountains, Star found the Bravo team helicopter and its pilot dead and abandoned. Continuing their search, the original Frost was soon attacked by demon dogs. The dogs then turned their eyes to the rest of Alpha team. They started to run to safety, and Brad Vickers, the pilot, saw the whole thing go down and was like, "Fuck this." With no other choice, Jill, Barry, Wesker, and Chris took shelter in the nearby mansion. Once in the mansion, the team spread it to investigate. Jill and Barry went together. Wesker went to investigate alone. Wow, what a great leader. There is no way he's gonna do something else. Anyway, in the dining car, Jill and Barry came across some blood stains. Barry stayed back to sniff the blood. You don't have to smell the blood to know it's blood, Barry. Jill would continue searching by herself when she would run into her first demon person, making lunch out of Kenneth, a member of Bravo team. Jill goes back to Barry, and Barry, with his amazing shooting skills, take down the zombie. They then return to the entrance where Albert Wesker was supposed to be waiting for them, but the man who wears sunglasses indoors was not there. Barry and Jill then split it up to search for the rest of Bravo team and Albert Wesker. While searching the mansion, Jill will run into a lot of different enemies. She will also come across STAR's Bravo team member Richard Atkin, who was poisoned by a big snake. Depending on how fast you are, Jill can save Richard, but he dies. Jill would battle Big Snake on 2 separate occasions, and she would manage to defeat Big Snake. She would then leave outside the mansion to the residential area where she would fight Big Plant. If you are real close with Barry, he would help you to defeat Big Plant. After defeating Big Plant, Jill would continue her search through the mansion. While going through the mansion, Jill would learn more and more about Umbrella's involvement in this situation, as well as all of their other crimes. Jill would even come across Umbrella's biggest secret and their biggest victim, Lisa Trevor, or the lab rat. Because Lisa Trevor's mind is just completely gone at this point, Jill had to defend herself against the 42-year-old woman. But this is not the only time Jill will run into Lisa Trevor. Thanks to this dude, Jill learned that there is a traitor inside of STARS, and he set them up. Because Jill didn't want to chase the fucking dude, he got to escape after shooting STARS Bravo team captain, which is that dude. She ended up finding the thing this mansion was hiding, the Arclay laboratory. As she's going through the Arclay laboratory, she will run into Chris Redfield, who is imprisoned. You can save him or leave him there, but Jill saves him. Continuing her investigation through the lab, Jill would discover that Albert Wesker was the traitor and he was a researcher for Umbrella? This is insane. You telling me the same guy who wears sunglasses indoors and at night? You telling me the same guy who wears black like it's his religion is the double agent? There was no way they was trying to hint that by the way he dressed. Jill and the other STARS Alpha team confronted Albert Wesker. Rebecca was also there. This is most likely how the events went, but in the game, in Jill's scenario, Jill would either confront Albert Wesker alone, or she would confront him with Barry Burton. And it would be discovered that Barry knew all along that Albert was the traitor, and that Barry was forced to help Wesker because he was threatening Barry's family. Wesker then awakened the Tyrant, and he would order the Tyrant to eliminate the rest of the STARS members. But the Tyrant would attack him. Jill would soon battle the Tyrant in the laboratory and defeat it. After the self-destruct system was activated, the STARS members began escaping the mansion. On the roof of the mansion, they would battle the Tyrant one last time, and using a rocket launcher, Jill would finally put an end to the Tyrant. Jill, Barry, Chris, and Rebecca escaped the mansion, with Brad Vickers, who I imagine was forced to come back from their superior officer, piloting the helicopter. After the mansion incident, STARS attempted to open a full-on investigation into Umbrella, but with the chief of police Brian Irons and many other government officials inside of Umbrella's Raleigh, their request was denied, and in August 1998, the STARS department was officially closed down. With no other choice, Chris and Jill opened up their own investigation. Chris' investigation led him to Europe. Barry would relocate his family to Canada, and Jill would stay in Raccoon, where she would secretly investigate Umbrella's underground facilities. However, it wouldn't take long for the world to see what Umbrella truly is after the mansion incident. In September 1998, Umbrella had a little falling out with one of its researchers. That researcher was William Birkin. After this falling out, Raccoon's drinking water became infected with the T-virus, would lead to thousands of infected. Umbrella decided to take full advantage of the situation, and they began to send in their BOWs to analyze their combat data. One of these BOWs was the newly created Nemesis Type T. But unlike most of the BOWs who was just there to wreak havoc, Nemesis was sent on a mission. He was going to eliminate their little STARS problem. Basically, by sending Nemesis, Umbrella was able to kill two stones with one bird. They were going to get rid of their little STARS problem, as well as get combat data on Nemesis. Jill was trapped in her apartment when the outbreak first started. In her apartment, Jill began to lose all hope and even thought about sending herself to the Shadow Realm. Yeah, that's what we're gonna call it from now on. On the 28th, Jill managed to escape her apartment. If you thought I was gonna explain what the hell was that explosion at the beginning of Resident Evil Nemesis, I thought I was too. Jill went around the city in search of a way out. She ran into Brad Vickers, who was injured in a recent zombie attack. Brad was also trying to leave the city. Before he went off alone, he warned Jill about something that is after them. Brad would survive long enough to make it to the police station, where Nemesis would finally catch up to him. Nemesis then turned his gaze at Jill and she escaped into the police station. In the STARS office, she intercepted a radio call from Carlos Olivero of the UBCS, or Umbrella's Biohazard Countermeasure Service. Jill would then leave the police station after being chased by Nemesis. Soon after, she ran into Carlos. Jill would reluctantly team up with Carlos and the UBCS after finding out they were working for Umbrella. They were just mercenaries and that they were also being used by Umbrella. Over the course of the night, Jill, Carlos, and Nikolai searched for parts to fix the tram. This tram was going to take them to the Michaels Clock Tower, which was flagged by the UBCS as an evacuation point. The captain of the team, Mikhail Victor, was too wounded to join them in the search. During the search, which Nikolai would be presumed dead, and after fixing the tram, the team was attacked by Nemesis, and Mikhail sacrificed himself to stop Nemesis. The tram would crash into the clock tower's courtyard. Jill and Carlos made it out of the wreckage pretty much unharmed. Jill made her way to the top of the clock tower to ring the bell as a signal. After ringing the bell, Jill was relieved as she saw the helicopter that was supposed to pick up the survivors. Looking at the helicopter, she saw the end to her night. She saw her escape. But that escape was denied by Nemesis as he shot down the helicopter. Jill was then infected by Nemesis, and she battled the Tyrant in the courtyard. After defeating Nemesis, Jill was unconscious for a day. Carlos protected her on the 29th, and when she woke up, Carlos went to the hospital to find a vaccine. He managed to find a vaccine, returned to Jill, and gave her it, and when he was also there, he discovered that Nikolai was still alive. And he also warned Jill about Nikolai. Carlos would go off on his own, and Jill would continue to search for a way out. At the park's graveyard, Jill would battle the gravedigger, and she would also run into Nikolai. He revealed to her that Umbrella was using this outbreak as a testing ground. Depending on the player's choice, Nikolai will either die or escape via helicopter at the end of the game. Jill then made her way to the dead facility. There she ran into Carlos, and he told her that the city would be destroyed. Jill also had her final encounters with Nemesis. In one of the encounters, she defeated him with acid, and in their final encounter, she weakened the Tyrant with a prototype railgun. I'm just gonna play the scene so you can view it.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
Killing the Tyrant, Jill and Carlos managed to escape the city via helicopter. As they left, they watched as the city was destroyed. Depending on your choice, Barry can actually come pick you up. By now, you should know how this works. I talk about the original and I talk about the remake if the remake is really different. Anyway, in the remake, you start in Jill's apartment where she recently had a nightmare about her turning into one of those demons. This is because what she experienced in the Spencer mansion. As you move around her apartment, you will soon receive a call from Brad Vickers telling her to leave. Then Jill will be attacked by Nemesis. Jill managed to escape her apartment building and Nemesis, and outside she will run into Brad Vickers, who was waiting for her. Automatically, you can see the differences between the remake and the original. In the original, Jill was trapped in her apartment when the outbreak first began. And the remake, Jill was... Wait a minute, when did this game take place? Because if it takes place on the 28th like in the original, the outbreak started on the 23rd and it got serious on the 25th. So how is Jill just now finding out about what the hell is happening in Raccoon? So maybe the times in the remake and the original is different. Nope, they still the same. You can see it right there. Both of them start on the exact same date on the 23rd and it gets serious on the 25th. So how did she just now find out about the outbreak? Wasn't she investigating Umbrella? If you investigate an Umbrella, you should know at least about something that the whole city know about. Jesus, the whole city is experiencing it. And then it's like, how doesn't she know? Jill has a TV. We can clearly see that in this cutscene. All she have to do is turn on the news. I'm sure it's gonna be on that. Who cares? Jill and Brad would soon run into a bar. Brad would get bitten and he would tell Jill to continue on without him. Jill then continues on, goes to a parking lot where a rescue helicopter is there to pick up survivors. Then Nemesis shoots down the helicopter. Jill would then crash into Nemesis, falling off of the parking lot roof with him. Nemesis and Jill were pretty much good after the crash. Then Carlos shoots Nemesis with a rocket launcher. Carlos then takes Jill to the subway station where the other UBCS members are. They were trying to get the trains back running to get survivors out of the city. Jill reluctantly helped them after once again finding out that they worked for Umbrella. She went around the city to restore power. She then met Nikolai, who shot a wounded UBCS member who could have been infected. After restoring the power, she had another encounter with Nemesis. She managed to escape, and after planning a route, Jill went back to the station, but she was followed by Nemesis. Knowing Nemesis was after her, she led him away from the others and escaped into the sewers. After escaping the sewers, she had another encounter with Nemesis and managed to defeat him. She then started to head back to the subway station. After returning to the station, Jill, the rest of the survivors, and the UBCS members, excluding Carlos and Tyrell, who had their own mission, started to leave the city. As they were leaving, the train was attacked by Nemesis. Nikolai then escaped and locked the others in the cart with Nemesis. Mikhail would sacrifice himself like in the original game. The train then derailed in the underground area. Jill managed to leave the underground area and she started heading to the Michael's clock tower. But Nemesis, now mutated, attacks Jill. Jill ended up battling the Tyrant and defeating him at the clock tower. After the defeating the tyrant, he infected her with the T-virus. Jill was unconscious for a while and ended up waking up on October 1st. During that time, Carlos moved Jill to the hospital as well as found the vaccine and gave it to her. He also protected Jill until he found out the city's fate. Jill woke up after Carlos left for the Umbrella Nest. She also went to the Umbrella Nest in hopes of finding the vaccine. She and Carlos was trying to stop the city from being destroyed. As she was going to the nest, Tyrell, who was wounded, came to search with her. But he was murdered by Nemesis. In the facility, Jill managed to find the vaccine. She was then attacked by Nemesis. Nikolai took the vaccine. Jill then battled the tyrant, and with the help of Carlos, she managed to defeat him. They then started going after Nikolai. Jill then had her final encounter with Nemesis. By using a prototype railgun, she managed to defeat it. She then managed to catch up with Nikolai. He then proved that he doesn't see gender and beat the shit out of Jill like he would anyone else. Nikolai baited her with the vaccine, then shot it. Nikolai, who just completely forgot that Carlos was there, was taken hostage by Carlos. Jill, who's an excellent shooter, managed to shoot Nikolai, and Jill and Carlos escaped the city as it was being destroyed, leaving Nikolai behind. After leaving Raccoon, Jill went to search for Chris. Either during her search for Chris or after she found Chris, Jill would join a private anti-biohazard service. In 2003, Jill and Chris finally had their first mission together after the mansion incident. Jill and Chris went to investigate a small town near an Umbrella facility in the Caucasus region of the Russian Federation. They were there to investigate strange animal attacks similar to the Arclay incident. They soon found out that the town was overrun with infected. While there, they found a little girl who was the only survivor. As they looked for more survivors, and after dealing with a horde of infected, they ran into Wesker. Chris asked Wesker if he had anything to do with this, and Wesker said it was an accident. Not really answering that question, but okay. Wesker then left after a sudden Hunter Delta attack. However, because of Wesker, they did learn that the town was involved with Umbrella, and that they were hiding bioweapons for Umbrella. Jill and Chris then went to the little survivor's home, and Wesker was also there. The little survivor's parents were working for Umbrella, and they had Umbrella information. Wesker was there to retrieve that information, but the little survivor had the key he was looking for. The girl then gave Wesker the key he was looking for, and once Wesker opened up the safe, it exploded. Chris, Jill, and the little girl made it out of the explosion unharmed, and Wesker also, because he's Wesker, was unharmed too, and he left with the information that he needed. But Wesker was the only one to leave with information. Jill and Chris now know that the nearby facility is an Umbrella facility, and literally the next day they invaded. While at the facility, they caught the attention of Colonel Sergei Vladimir. He then sent out the Talos or the T-011 to battle the two agents. They managed to defeat it and the base failed. However, they weren't able to access any of Umbrella's information. Why? Because Wesker used this little raid as a decoy. He took the information that he needed and he destroyed the Raid Queen. But Wesker would use this information to take down Umbrella, as well as for his own personal reasons. After Umbrella trial was over and Umbrella filed for bankruptcy, a lot of their bioweapons went to the black market. Some was being sold by Wesker and whatever company he was working with, and others were being sold by some other former Umbrella employees. And because of this, the war on terror started to switch to the war on bioterrorists. To combat this, the BSAA was formed with a lot of pharmaceutical grants. But as a paramilitary, the BSAA didn't have much power, and this is no better shown than in the Terra Grigia panic. The US Federal Bioterrorist Commission were in charge of the situation. The director of the BSAA, Clive R. O'Brien, was also there, but he didn't have any power, and he could only watch as Terra Grigia failed to Veltro's bioweapons and later the solar ray thingy. However, while there, O'Brien started to suspect that Morgan Lansdale had something to do with this incident. After the Terra Grigia panic, the UN took over the BSAA. Jill and Chris joined the BSAA, and in 2005, Director O'Brien took Jill and her new partner, Parker Luciani, to the Italian coast to see the Terra Grigia ruins that washed ashore. But the city ruins wasn't the only thing that washed ashore. Whatever the hell those things were came with it. Then O'Brien told Jill and Parker that Chris and his new partner were captured by terrorists and taken to the Mediterranean. The two then went out to search for Chris and Jessica Sherwatt. Jill and Parker were able to find the Queen Zenobia, which most of you may already know. George Trevor's blueprints were used to create the Queen Zenobia. George Trevor is the same guy that built the Spencer Mansion. On the ship, Jill and Parker quickly discovered that the ship was overran by those infected with the T-Abyss virus, the same virus that was used during the Terra Grigia panic. They also discovered that the FBC was on this ship, after Jill discovered the body of Rachel Foley. Continuing through the ship, the pair discovered a room with Chris. No, it was a trap. Just a dummy strapped to a chair. The room then filled with gas, and as they lost consciousness, they noticed the Veltro flag, and some guy wearing a gas mask entered the room. He separated Jill and Parker in the ritzy part of the ship, and when he had time, he destroyed the communication system. And he also burned Jill and Parker's boat. When Jill finally woke up, she went to search for Parker. She ran into Parker, who also discovered their equipments. Once they get in their equipments, they went to the bridge to contact command, but they soon discovered that the communication system was destroyed. After finding out about the emergency communication system, they went to the room, defeated whatever hell that thing was to get the key, went inside of there, and it was destroyed too. The emergency communication system was also destroyed. Guess who was also in the room? Raymond Vester. Who the hell is Raymond Vester, you're asking? Well, he's an agent of the FBC. He said it was destroyed before I got there. God, I hope they don't believe him. Anyway, they then started heading to the bottom of the ship because it was having problems. To get there, they had to split up, and Jill fought Rachel Foley, who was now mutated. And why does she look hotter mutated? After beating Rachel, Jill and Parker continued down to the lower ship. After fixing a problem, they got into a little situation. And at that exact same time, Chris and Jessica were searching for them on the Queen Zenobia 2. I know it's called the Queen Samaris, whatever the fuck the name is. It's just the Queen Zenobia 2. Anyway, Jill managed to get them out of that situation, and they finally got in contact with Director O'Brien, who told them that the Queen Zenobia was going to get raided by the FBC satellite. After redirecting the satellite, Jill and Parker went back to the casino, where they were confronted by the Veltro member wearing the gas mask. Jessica, showing that she is an American of American, shot first and asked questions never. Then it was revealed that the guy in the gas mask was Raymond. Raymond then told Parker something. You're gay. Also, Jessica is working for Morgan Lansdale. And he faked eyes. They then switched partners. Jill and Chris went to the laboratory. Jessica and Parker went to the bridge. After making it to the Queen Zenobia's lab, Jill discovered that Morgan Lansdale was behind the creation of the T-Abyss virus, and that he gifted it to Veltro, which started the whole Terra Grigia thing. And after that, he created a vaccine, and once the vaccine was created, he unleashed the T-Abyss virus on the Queen Zenobia and the Queen Zenobia 2. Jill then returned to Chris, and Lansdale shows himself. He said he's gonna blow up the ship and bury all the evidence, like the Queen Zenobia 2. Then the ship's self-destruct system was activated. It was Jessica. Chris and Jill then started making their way to the deck, where a helicopter would pick them up. At the deck, they fought whatever the hell this is, and in the helicopter, they continued to put it down. On the helicopter, O'Brien told them that he and Raymond set up the whole Veltro re-emergence thing to put pressure on Lansdale, but they don't really have no proof to get Lansdale, and now their only hope is to go to the Queen Dido, or the Queen Zenobia 3. The Queen Zenobia 3 was gifted to Veltro by Lansdale. That is basically how they got their bioweapons into Terra Grigia. So Jill and Chris then went to the Queen Dido, which is now sunken with the city, and they discovered that whatever the hell those things came from the Queen Zenobia 3. Continuing on the ship, they discovered that the Veltro members were still alive because air pockets work the way they work, and they were infecting themselves with the T-Abyss virus to fight the FBC, who were sent there by Lansdale to get rid of Veltro. They then discovered that the leader of Veltro was still alive. I don't know his name, but if I say his name, that means I looked it up, and that he had a recording of all of his interactions with Lansdale. That would be enough proof. But also in this little clip, you can see that he infected himself with the T-Abyss virus, but when Jill and Chris make it to him, he infected himself again. I know people were talking about how this doesn't make sense, but I'm here to make sense out of it. Here it is. I think he had 2 vials of the virus. After they battled Jack Norman, who believed that they were Lansdale, Jill delivers the line that made her my favorite character.
I hope he finds more comfort in death than he did in life.
I'll explain why later. They finally left the Queen Dido. Lansdale finally went down. What's his name? Stepped down as the director of the UBCS. FBC. Fucking BSAA. Oh yeah, Parker. Parker was believed to have died at the Queen Zenobia when it was being destroyed. But he was saved by Raymond, who was working for Tricell with Jessica, and they managed to get the T-Abyss virus for Tricell. Also, Parker was later found at the Italian coast. Let me take you back to 2003. After Our Umbrella Child ended, Oswald Lee Spencer became one of the most wanted men, and the worldwide manhunt began. It was led by the US and the Russian governments. Spencer wasn't the only person the world was after though. A separate manhunt was looking for Albert Wesker. In 2006, the location of the Spencer estate was discovered, and of course, Spencer was gonna be there. Jill and Chris led the raid on the Spencer estate. In fact, they were the only two there. Like, once they arrived, the Master of Unlocking got to work, and of course she managed to break in. Once inside, they discovered the bodies of Spencer guards, who was murdered by a separate third party. Also in the Spencer estate, they discovered that Spencer continued his research, and he created a new BOW called fucking Bloops. Once they made it to Spencer's room, he was dead, and Albert Wesker stood over his body. They then engaged in an ass beating by Wesker, and once Wesker was choking the life out of Chris, Jill saved Chris by tackling Wesker and falling out of a window with him. Jill and Wesker was believed to have died in that fall. I can get Jill, but Wesker? Chris, you have seen Wesker survive some of the most craziest shit, but oh, a big fall is the thing that kills him this time. Anyway, Jill and Wesker survived the fall. Jill was badly wounded, but Wesker took her to the nearest Tricell lab. Only when he was able to did he move her to the lab in the Kajuju region in Africa, or that's how I imagine how it went. Anyway, Wesker didn't save Jill because he was just the goodest of people. No, he wanted Jill to be a test subject, and once Wesker began development on the Ouroboros virus, it was discovered that Jill would make a horrible test subject. Why? Because she possessed an antibody. Remember when she was infected in 1998? Well, after she was infected and cured, the virus stayed in her blood for a little while, and only recently did she develop a rare antibody. Instead of getting rid of Jill, Wesker kept her around, realizing that she has other uses. Like as a factory, a blood factory. What do I mean by this? Well, Jill is immune to the T virus, and Wesker believed that if he used Jill blood, he could create a stronger Ouroboros virus. So to get this rare blood from Jill, Wesker would continue to infect her with the T virus, and because of this, Jill's hair would turn blonde and her skin would become pale. After the Ouroboros virus reached a certain point, Jill wasn't really needed for that project anymore, but Wesker still wanted to keep her around, saying she may have other uses, like for the P30 project. What was the P30, you ask? Well, the P30 project was a super soldier project. Instead of using the Plagas like Tricell other super soldier project, this one used a drug developed by the progenitor virus, which is the P30. But there was being the drug would have to continuously be administered, and that was the point of that little robot on Jill's chest. And for Wesker, Jill was the perfect test subject because they didn't know the effects of this P30. If the long-term effects are fatal, who really cares in Tricell? It's Jill. Once they put the little robot on Jill's chest, they realized that the project was a little expensive, as well as it wasn't going to work too great, so it was abandoned. Tricell then started to test their Plagas Type 3 on the Nidipaya tribe, and Irving was like, why not just test it on the citizens of Kajuju? Irving and Tricell then started testing the Plagas Type 2 on the people of Kajuju. In 2009, Irving, proving once again that he just can't keep his identity a secret no matter what, was discovered by the BSAA. If you don't know what I mean by this, he was also discovered by Patrick, Spencer's butler. After he was discovered by the BSAA spies, Jill was then ordered to protect Irving and his recent business deal. And during that exact same time, the BSAA sent an Alpha team, and this team was slaughtered by the bioweapons in Kajuju. After the failure there was Alpha Team, the BSAA then sent in old reliable Chris Redfield, and of course he needed a partner, or what I like to say, a guide, so Sheva Ulmer was sent to help him. As they were going around the city of Kajuju, they managed to corner Irving. Jill was like, hey, you wanna see a magic trick? And bam, Irving was gone. She then took Irving to the oil field where she would give him an ultimatum. She told Irving that, listen here, you have shit to do. You can't get captured because you know too much, and you can't allow them to follow you. So here, take this. This will help you with your little problem. Not that problem, the BSA. Then she left. After Jill left, Irving thought of a little plan. He set bombs throughout the oil field, and once the BSA or Chris and Sheva arrived to the oil field, the place is gonna go boom! It didn't work. He did put up some kind of a fight thanks to the Plagas egg before he eventually lost. Anyway, Jill was making her way to the cave where Wesker and Excella were. The same cave where the flower stereo of the sun was. Also the Trisol lab and Kajuju. Jill guarded Excella as she played with the little intruders, Chris and Sheva. Chris and Sheva was there because Irving just can't shut his goddamn face up. Then they would wait for a Trisol tanker to pick them up. Chris and Sheva would soon arrive to their location, and with no other choice, Wesker and Jill battled the BSAA agents. Well, Wesker kinda had a choice. Wesker, who was busy, wanted to play with them for like 7 minutes, but after that time was up, he and Excella went to board the tanker. While they was battling Jill, they discovered that the little item on her chest was the thing that was controlling her, so after committing some borderline sexual harassment, they managed to pull it off. After they managed to pull the P-30 off of Jill, Jill was exhausted and weak. She told Chris not to worry about her and that he need to continue on without her because he's the only one who can stop Wesker. Chris and Sheva then continued on, and Jill got a little rest. Then Josh Stone of the BSAA arrived. Not too long ago, he had contacted the BSAA headquarters and they sent helicopters. Jill told him about the tanker and their goal became to intercept it. On their way to the helicopter, Jill managed to get in contact with Chris and Sheva. She told him about Wesker's little weakness, and if they give him enough of that little sweet drug, he could experience an overdose, and an overdose would be fatal. Because of the amount of the Mangini, Josh and Jill asked their pilot to meet them a lot closer to their location. Once they arrived to the helicopter, the pilot died. The helicopter was unharmed. Josh then became the new pilot. They started heading to the tanker. As they got closer to the tanker, they were able to see the stealth bomber take off, and they were able to see it crash into a nearby volcano. Chris and Sheva then began fighting Wesker, who infected himself with the Ouroboros virus. Jill and Josh then arrived, picked up Chris and Sheva, then they gave them 2 rocket launchers and they put an end to Wesker. This game is the last time we get to see this Jill. I mean, Jill in Dead Island does exist, but that's more of Remake Jill. After leaving Africa, Jill was taken to a BSAA lab where she will undergo a lot of tests. There they discovered an excuse for why Jill looked the exact same way as she did in 1998 in Dead Island, and during that time she wrote to Barry. She talked a little about her boredom and she gave Barry advice on how he could repair his relationship with his daughter Moira. She also told him that she would love to have a welcoming party when she returned. After Jill's rehabilitation was done, she resumed her battle against bioweapons. 9 years after the Kajuju incident, Jill was still being affected by the P-30 psychologically. Jill felt extremely guilty about the things Wesker made her do. She started to develop the desire to atone, and this was shown through her reckless actions. In San Francisco, there has been a number of infected with no means of transmission, and those attacked by the ones infected did not reanimate. The San Francisco police teamed up with the BSA to figure out what the hell was going on. Jill and Chris led the investigation. Jill, who went to investigate a recent attack alone, after ignoring Chris's orders to wait for backup, she entered the home. There she discovered the mutilated body of a woman. Continuing through the house, she was attacked by an infected. Jill managed to neutralize the infected. Chris and the backup then arrived. Chris then berated Jill for her actions, and she justified by saying that there could have been a survivor, and every second waited decreases their chances. The bodies were then taken for further examination. Jill and Chris also left the scene. Jill went to the shooting range. Chris soon arrived after talking to Rebecca. Chris would tell Jill that he's going to request that she be taken off the case, but she declined the notion. Jill then talks about her time under Wesker control, saying how she wanted to kill Chris. She compared it to a nightmare. Chris then talks about Pierce Nevins, who he wanted to take his position, but Pierce sacrificed himself for Chris. Chris then tells Jill that the longer this war on bioterrorists continues, the more they will become numb to the horrors that they see. Jill then responds with, she can't worry about those kind of things, because people are being turned into monsters, and the people who's doing that to them have no soul. Okay, you know how I said that this Jill is like Remake Jill? When I first watched this movie, this line almost made me say this is the worst fucking character in Resident Evil. But my feelings changed now. Anyway, let's get through this movie. Jill and Chris are later seen in a BSA lab where Rebecca and Claire were examining a mutated Will corpse. Then they told Jill and Chris where they think people are being infected at. Everyone who was infected visited the Alcatraz Island, so this must mean that they are being infected there. Jill, Chris, and Claire then went to the Alcatraz Island, which is a prison, to investigate. Rebecca stayed back to work on a vaccine. The three tried to blend in with tourists, but when all hell broke loose, they had to pull out their guns and shoot some zombies. Jill got separated from the others trying to save a guard who fell into the sewers. She didn't get to save him. In the sewers, Jill ran into Leon, who... Wait a minute. This is the first time Jill is ever on screen with Leon or Claire. I really hate the fact that it has to be in a movie. Anyway, they were then attacked by a herd of lickers. Leon managed to clear out the lickers, and continuing, they made it to the armory, where they discussed their missions, realizing that their missions are linked. And they also discovered the biomosquito drone blueprints. Then the mastermind led Leon and Jill to the cells, where Chris and Claire are. And whoever the hell this guy is. He's important to this movie, but not important to Jill. The mastermind behind the whole thing then shows himself, and he tells them how everyone is being infected by the biodrones. Leon is infected. He then continues to go down a really stupid monologue. I don't even remember what he was saying. I just remember it was dumb. He also told them about his stupid plan to infect the world with his biodrones. And this girl, who's not important to Jill, but is important to the previous movie that wasn't that great, and Leon, attacks Jill, and then Leon throws a flash grenade and Jill runs to stop the biodrones. While Jill was going to stop the biomosquito drones, she ran into Rebecca, who lost her entire team and managed to create the vaccine. Jill told Rebecca where she can find the others and to hurry. Jill then made it to the armory. Blake continued saying the dumbest shit possible, and he infected himself with his version of the T-virus. The others soon arrived, and they finally managed to put Blake down. After winning, they celebrated, and then they left the island. This is the last time we see any Jill. I hear people still saying Jill may be in Resident Evil 9, and if she is, I will definitely update this video. It's time to get to my favorite part of the video, Jill's character analysis. When we think of Jill, we think of somebody who's calm, focused, capable, strong, somebody who always cool under pressure, tactical, and battle-hardened. We also think of someone who's compassionate, somebody who shares her compassion with everyone, even her enemies. And that's why this line made Jill my favorite character, because most people don't do those kind of things. Jill somehow still had some compassion for Jack Norman, who killed so many people. And also we think of someone with a strong sense of justice. Someone who literally just left the military, joined the police force to fuel her justice meter. Someone who would sacrifice life or a limb to do what she feels is right. What if I tell you that that's not true? Or, well, that's not the whole truth. But before we get to that, I want to announce that we're about to play a little game called The Two Jills. Before we get into the game, we need to set the rules. I have to talk about both the Jills and explain how they're similar and how they differ. Spoiler alert, everything I said about Remake Jill and how she's completely different from OG Jill, just throw it in the trash. Burn it. Bury it. I don't believe that no more. The thing about both Jills is both Jills have a strong sense of justice. I explained how OG Jill's sense of justice worked with the whole meter thingy, and Remake Jill, we can see that it kinda works the same way. Just like OG Jill, after the mansion incident, she still was trying to bring Umbrella to justice. And in Resident Evil 3 Remake and in Dead Island, she still puts herself in unbelievable danger just to do what she feels is right. Both Jills also want to be a strong person, but their ideas of what a strong person is differ. What do I mean by this? OG Jill believes that a strong person is compassionate, calm, strong-willed, basically the person I described at the beginning of this section. While Remake Jill believes that a strong person is your tough-as-nails hero, someone who risks everything to save one person, basically the classic action hero. And also both Jills believe that to be strong, they have to put their feelings to the side. But both Jills don't believe that there is this person, this strong person. For Remake Jill, it's kinda easy to see that she doesn't really see herself as this strong person, because it feels like she constantly has to prove to herself that she's that person. In Resident Evil Dead Island, you can see this at the beginning of the scene, where she literally puts herself and crazy danger just to save someone who could have existed. I feel like it's more than just her trying to atone for what Wesker made her do, because if we look back at Resident Evil 3 Remake, she does kind of the same things. She puts herself in unbelievable danger, even when she doesn't even have to, just to try to help. Also, she hates being weak, or hates showing weakness, or what she feels is weakness. Throughout Resident Evil 3 Remake Jill is scared. I mean, she is fucking scared, but she doesn't show anyone it. In fact, she's still traumatized from the Spencer Mansion incident, but she still doesn't tell anyone about it. And I understand, somebody might say, but that is not the time to talk about your emotions. So now let's go to a time where she could have. This scene with Chris in Dead Island. In this scene, we get to see the most vulnerable she's ever been in front of someone when she tells Chris about her time under Wesker. But she then takes a small pause after saying it was like living in a nightmare and say, I'm fine. This is a way of saying, don't worry about me, bro, I'm good, when you're clearly not good. But then Chris opens up. He tells her about Pierce and how he felt at that moment and how he still feels now. However, her answer is what really made me realize this. Usually when somebody opens up to you and tells you about their feelings, you feel more comfortable to talk about yours. Sometimes you just listen. She responds with, innocent people are being poisoned and used as weapons. Whoever's doing that has no soul. And if we're gonna stop them, we can't afford to think about being numb or souls or any of that shit. At least I can't. She wasn't invalidating Chris's emotions. No, she was trying to stop herself. She wasn't talking to Chris in this scene. She was talking to herself. She understands what Chris was saying was right, but she knows that if she's gonna be that hero, that person, she can't think about being those kind of things. That's why I say Remake Jill does not believe that she's that person, because she constantly has to force herself to be this person. Okay, so with OG Jill, it's a little harder to prove that she doesn't see herself as this person. I just simply say that she's still trying to be this person, so that must mean she doesn't really see herself as that person. So that is still debatable whether she see herself as this strong person or not. With both Jills, they exhibit this stoicism. It's not because they don't feel anything, but it's simply because they want people to look at them as this strong person. With Remake Jill, I just explained it that she doesn't really see herself as that strong person, but she want people to look at her as that person so they won't worry about her. And I think the same goes for OG Jill. So when I first was getting to this part right here, I was generally curious about what am I going to talk about? How am I going to show this about OG Jill? When most people describe her, they usually describe this person who's so strong, focused, empathetic, almost superhuman. But then I remembered Jill is human, and that's generally all that I need. Was just to remind myself that Jill is still human. If you remember what I said, when Jill was trapped in her apartment in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, there's implications that she may have thought about sending herself to the Shadow Realm. And when we think about it, Jill has been in worse situations than this, or even equal situations. Who's to say that these kind of thoughts hasn't returned? I'm not saying that Jill is suicidal. I'm just saying that if they have, it's not like Jill will ever talk about it. And that brings me to my second point. Jill doesn't share much about herself at all. If you can tell me one time where Jill generally talks about her feelings or generally shares anything with anybody, then I'll give you a cookie. Chris and Barry may be the closest people to Jill, but I can guarantee you that they know just as much about her childhood as we do, and I'm sure they still don't know that Jill has Delta Force training. So as we can see, Jill don't even talk much about her personal life. So do you really think Jill would talk about her trauma or sending herself to the Shadow Realm type thoughts? No. And I'm genuinely asking this question, and I'm sure your answer is no, just like mine. But if you really do think that, I have to tell you two things. The first one, Resident Evil 5. Jill in Resident Evil 5 just got that P30 pulled off of her. She's emotionally drained and physically drained. But do you know what she tells Chris? I'm fine. Go on and stop Wesker. don't worry about me. Sure, you may agree that this is not the time to talk about your feelings, and I 100% agree with that too. However, the second thing I want to talk about is Resident Evil Revelations 2, her letter to Barry. Jill just got back from Africa. Do you know what she tells Barry? I'm fine. She talks a little about it, but it's mostly just, I'm fine, but I changed a little. But you know what she mostly talk about in that letter? She mostly talk about Barry and his personal life, how he can repair his relationship with his daughter. That's what Jill mostly talk about. So based off all of that, I think that Jill feels that she has to be the one that everyone can rely on emotionally. We all have that friend. Shit. I'm kind of that friend who always there to listen to our problems, never really talks about themselves, but they're always there for you. And I feel like that's Jill. Jill feels that she has to be that person. I feel that Jill thinks that she always has to be the one there for everyone else. But when it comes to herself, she has to just figure out a way to pour herself out of the depths of despair. If you all know that isn't healthy. So far, I haven't really talked about why I think that Jill's stoicism is kind of a mask, but I have 4 reasons why. One of the reasons is I already talked about it. Jill goes through a whole bunch of shit and she doesn't even talk much about it. And even the calmest of people would not be able to not be affected by the shit that goes on in Jill's life. The next one is a scene with Carlos. This is the first time where we see OG Jill like this. I'm gonna play the scene so you can see what I mean.
Hey, take it easy.
I'm okay. Don't feel any pain. But that's what bothers me. If I can't feel anything, then what does that mean?
The next reason is there is this sadness that I felt from Jill when I was replaying Resident Evil Revelations. I was playing this game before I even wrote this script. This is a little theory of mine, but as I mentioned, Jill doesn't talk much about her own feelings at all. In fact, she just bottles them up, or what I feel, she feels that she has to be the only one to deal with them. And I started to think that maybe this was all of her trauma building up and finally coming out just a tiny bit. But like I said, that's just a theory. You know what's coming next. A game theory. Look, I know I may seem a little crazy talking like this about a video game character, but I tend to look at every character in any media as a human first, unless they're written way too bad for me not to even consider them human. And the last one is, of course, that most of the remake characters usually have the core of their original counterparts changed a little, but not too much. You can see that with Leon, Claire, Ada, and so I was trying to figure out why was Jill different? And the answer is simple, she wasn't. Anyway, before I end this section, I want to say this last thing. What Chris says to Jill in Dead Island is extremely important. Remake Jill, for a fact, is going down that path towards numbness. And I think the same goes for OG Jill. Well, that's basically the end of this video. I'm not gonna lie, I really liked making this video, and I have been meaning to make this video for like a while, but I also wanted to wait out for even longer, but I'm like, shit, I might as well do this shit right now. But anyway, Jill is such an amazing character, and I just have one thing. I wish the Capcom would just give her a more personal story. Bro, these goddamn OG protagonists, we knew these people for so long, but we never got a story that was just personal, that was just extremely personal just for them. And I feel like that will make these characters so much better if Capcom just do it for once, please. But anyway, if you like this video, you can give it a like. If you didn't, thank you for the watch time. Also, if you like anything hurricane related, you can think about subscribing and comment any character you want me to do next or any topic you want me to cover. With the Resident Evil review trailer finally out, I'm sure a lot of people was wondering who is going to be the antagonist. So you can click on that video right there, and that basically tells you who I think is going to be an antagonist. And if you want to, you can also click on this little playlist that will give you more Bird's Tales. But anyway. You still here?